Daniel, you didn't die in that alley, did you? Walter's voice cracked as the shovel hit something solid beneath the drenched earth. The metallic sound cut through the rain like a memory, refusing to stay buried. He dropped to his knees, hands clawing through mud until his fingertips found cold metal. A watch. Not just any watch. His son's. The same one he'd given Daniel on his 21st birthday, engraved on the back. For the days we still have left. His breath caught in his throat. For 10 years, he had believed the police, believed that his boy's body was stolen in some faceless robbery far from home. Yet here it was, in the soil he tended every morning, in the park he'd kept alive when everyone else moved on. His palms shook as he turned over. The leather strap wasn't the same. It was newer, cleaner, replaced by someone's careful hand. He could hear the faint, impossible ticking inside. Steady and alive. His voice came out low, trembling. You've been here all along. Rainwater streamed off his chin as he rose, clutching the watch. The marble statue of the lost son's memorial loomed in front of him, its plaque shining under the storm light. The mayor's name, Harold Dunn, was carved beneath it. The same man who consoled him at Daniel's funeral, who'd said, "Some truths aren't worth digging up." Walter. His grip on the watch tightened until his knuckles turned white. He had dug anyway. And now the truth had bled through the earth like rot under flowers. Inside the caretaker's shed, the single bulb flickered. Walter placed the watch on the wooden table, beside his logbook. His reflection in the cracked mirror behind it looked older, harder. The years had taken his hair, his posture, his peace, but not his patience. He opened the back of the watch using a small screwdriver, the same one he used to fix the park's fountain clocks. A small gold gear inside gleamed bright against the rust. Fresh. Someone had opened this. Someone had been here. His eyes moved the maintenance ledger hanging on the wall, columns of dates, names, city orders. His finger stopped at one. April 17th, site inspection, approved by Marcus Dunn. Harold Dunn's son, the contractor who'd taken over city projects last spring, the same week they dug new pipes through the section of the park. His heartbeat thudded against the table. "You buried him here," he whispered, his voice trembling but steady enough to echo. "And you paid me to keep it clean." He stared at his hands, soil still packed under his nails, and saw something new there. Purpose. Not rage, not grief, but the calm that comes before a plan. He turned and looked at the shelves lined with his old gardening tools. Spades, pruning shears, fertilizer sacks, iron stakes, rusted bolts. To anyone else, they were junk. To him, they were instruments of truth. He moved like a man rehearsing muscle memory, gathering the old city map he'd kept pinned to the corkboard for years. His finger traced the perimeter of the park, down toward the maintenance tunnel where the new water system connected to city lines. That was where the construction crew had worked the night Marcus Dunn visited. The police report said Daniel's body was found 2 miles away, but Walter remembered the casket was closed. They'd told him the injuries were too severe. He had believed them, because grief makes fools of fathers. He sat at the table, the ticking of the watch loud enough to fill the silence. The bulb above hummed faintly, flickering as the storm outside deepened. He picked up his pen, opened the logbook, and wrote beneath the last entry, "New growth begins tonight." Then he reached for the old camera he kept for documentation. Broken lens, cracked casing, but it still clicked when he tested it. He stared at it for a moment before whispering, "You wanted me to watch over this park. Fine. I'll make sure it tells the truth." His voice had no anger left, just cold precision. Outside, the rain had slowed to a steady drizzle. The garden glistened under the dim orange glow of the streetlights. Walter stepped into the mud, his boots sinking deep into the soil. He walked to the statue where he had found the watch, staring at the base where the concrete looked newer than the rest. He pressed his hand against it. It was warm, too smooth. Fresh work, hidden beneath old plaques. He knelt, tracing the corner seam with his thumb. "You thought this ground would stay quiet," he murmured, "but it remembers every hand that touched it." His gaze lifted toward the mayor's office lights visible through the trees, glowing faintly across the street like an unrepentant flame. He went back to the shed, dried the watch gently, and slipped it into his coat pocket. The ticking press against his chest, rhythmic, accusing. On the shelf sat his son's photo, Daniel smiling with a wrench in one hand, a sunflower in the other. Walter touched the frame. "They buried your truth under roses, boy," he whispered. "Let's make it bloom." He turned off the bulb, plunging the room into darkness, except for the faint glimmer from the window. The night outside was heavy but alive, carrying a sound he hadn't heard in years. The heartbeat of purpose. He sat down, reached for the old recorder he used to capture bird calls, and pressed the red button. "Log entry," he said, voice calm and deliberate. "The soil has memory." And tonight it spoke. He let the tape roll for a few seconds before clicking it off. He looked again at the watch, the time frozen at 9:47 p.m., the official time of death on the police report. His eyes hardened. "Let's fix that," he muttered. He adjusted the hands until they struck midnight sharp. The faint click echoed through the small room like a trigger being pulled. Outside, the thunder rolled again, rattling the shed's thin walls. Walter opened the door and stepped into the wind, rain slicing across his face. He looked one last time at the polished statue gleaming under lightning, the monument that stood above his son's grave without ever admitting it. Then he turned his back to it, heading toward the gate. His figure moved slowly but firmly, like a man who had finally remembered why he was alive. The pocket watch ticked against his heart, steady and relentless. Somewhere deep inside, something long dead had started moving again, and as he disappeared into the dark path leading to the mayor's house, he whispered the words that would haunt the night. "You planted him here, Harold. Let's see what grows when I dig again." The wind caught his voice and carried it through the trees, and in that sound, time began to turn against the men who thought it had buried him. "You built this park on lies, Harold," Walter muttered under his breath as he knelt beside the statue, pressing his fingers into the damp soil. His words weren't for anyone to hear, just the ghosts who listened better than the living. The ground was cold, heavy with rain, but his hands moved with steady purpose. He opened a small tin box lined with plastic and placed a silver watch inside. Next to it, he slid a folded photo of Daniel, smiling under summer light, and a slip of paper with one sentence written in neat, shaking pen. "Time remembers everything." Then he covered it with soil, firm and deliberate, as if planting a seed that would bloom in guilt instead of petals. His eyes flicked toward the construction cameras mounted on the far light pole, small, unnoticed details he'd spent days studying. He knew their blind spots by heart. Every move he made tonight would look like maintenance, just another old man caring for the city's memorial park. But he wasn't maintaining anymore. He was rewriting. 2 days had passed since he'd found the watch, and the silence had grown louder. Every tick of every clock in his shed had begun to feel like a countdown. He had said nothing to anyone, no calls, no outbursts, just quiet observation. He'd started to notice patterns. The same black SUV parked near the mayor's office every night, the same man in a construction jacket, checking the garden sensors after hours. Marcus Dunn, the son who inherited not only his father's fortune, but his arrogance. Walter had watched him from a distance, pretending to sweep the paths while memorizing his routines. Marcus never noticed him. Nobody ever noticed a gardener. That was the advantage of being invisible. They had buried his son under this park because they thought no one would look. They were wrong. Walter wasn't just looking, he was preparing. He walked back toward the shed, mud clinging to his boots, his jacket heavy with damp earth and secrets. Inside, the air smelled of iron and rain. He wiped his hands, then sat at the table where the open watch lay beside a new map of the park. Colored pins marked the foundation lines, drain outlets, and monument bases. He circled one section near the south fountain. That was where he'd seen Marcus stop and make a call last week, looking over his shoulder. Walter had replayed that moment in his mind again and again, Marcus glancing down, pressing his foot against the soil like testing something buried. There had been no flowers planted there since. That's where the next seed would go. He opened the drawer, pulled out an old voice recorder, and tested the mic's static buzz softly, then cleared. "Entry 2, he said quietly. "The soil accepts what men deny. Tonight, it begins to remember." At dawn, he arrived at the park with his wheelbarrow and a tray of rose saplings. The city manager waved from across the lot, oblivious. Morning, Walt. Another day in paradise. Walter forced a nod. Something like that. He smiled faintly, pushing the barrel down the path toward the south fountain. His movements were slow but precise, every motion choreographed. He placed each sapling in its hole, snapping small photos with the camera hidden in his coat's inner pocket. Images that captured the cracked cement near the foundation and the faint outline of a removed tile. He slipped a small metallic device under the last plant, an old voice recorder, disguised under soil and roots, set to activate when weight pressed down on it. Then he whispered, "Let the ground listen this time." By noon, Marcus arrived in his tailored suit, greeting city staff with the easy confidence of a man who believed history bowed to him. Walter kept his head down as Marcus approached the fountain, his polished shoes glinting in the sunlight. The man checked his phone, stepped onto the edge of the new concrete slab, and the recorder clicked on beneath him. Walter's hand tightened on the shovel as the faint buzz confirmed it was working. Marcus was on a call. "Yeah, I handled it. He won't find anything. Old man's too far gone to dig that deep." The words drifted to the tiny mic and straight into the hidden device buried under his own feet. Walter's chest tightened, not with grief, but satisfaction. He kept digging, face calm, posture humble, while his heart pounded like a second heartbeat. When Marcus finally left, Walter returned to the shed, removed the dirt-streaked recorder from his pocket, and played it back. The voice came through faint but clear, threaded with arrogance. "He won't find anything. Old man's too far gone." Walter stared at the recorder for a long time, jaw clenched. "You just confessed to the dirt, son," he murmured. He pulled out an envelope, slipped the recorder inside, and labeled it for when they asked. Then he sealed it shut, hands steady. That night, he didn't sleep. The storm returned, wind rattling the shed door, as he sat by the window watching lightning flash over the memorial statue. He could see the outline of the mayor's mansion across the street, its lights glowing soft and smug. He thought of Harold Dunn's words from years ago, how he'd promised to look into it, how he'd place a hand on Walter's shoulder with false sympathy. He remembered the smell of Daniel's jacket, the way the police never let him see the body, the way the papers called a tragedy of the night. Every lie had been spoken with the same smooth tone Harold used on the news. Walter whispered into the dark, "You talk too much, Harold." But this time, the ground will talk back. The next morning, Walter walked into City Hall, carrying a small basket of roses. He greeted the receptionist with a kind smile. "These are for the mayor," he said. "A thank you from the park staff." She smiled, flattered by his gentleness, and waved him through. He placed the basket on the mayor's desk personally, bowing slightly. "Sir, I just wanted to thank you for trusting me all these years," he said softly. Harold Dunn smiled, distracted, his phone buzzing. "Of course, Walter. You've done excellent work. The park's the pride of the city." Walter's gaze dropped to the roses. Beneath the petals, in the soil packed around their stems, was another recorder, this one preloaded with the clip of Marcus's voice. When Harold leaned over to admire the flowers, Walter met his eyes. "Funny thing about gardens," he said. "You never know what might grow if the soil remembers." Harold blinked, confused, but Walter was already turning to leave. As he stepped into the hallway, his expression hardened, the polite mask fading. The doors closed behind him with a soft thud that sounded final. He walked out into the sunlight, the wind tugging gently at his coat. The ticking of Daniel's watch pressed against his chest, each second steady as a pulse. He looked back once at the mayor's window, where Harold stood smelling the roses, unaware that every word he was about to speak into his phone would be recorded forever. Walter whispered, almost a breeze, "Let's see how loud silence can get." The camera of fate would have caught the faint smile tugging at his lips as he walked away, leaving behind a seed that would soon bloom into ruin. "You think silence is loyalty?" Walter's voice trembled with quiet fury as he stared at the mayor's aide across the table. The younger man laughed nervously, tapping a pen against a glossy folder filled with permits. "I think silence is professionalism, Mr. Crane. You do your job, you get your check. That's how it works." Walter's eyes didn't move from the folder. "And what about the part where my son's body was buried under that job?" The man froze, the color draining from his face. The sound of the ticking watch in Walter's pocket, fill the air like a heartbeat too loud to ignore. Walter leaned closer, his voice low but sharp enough to cut. You people thought roots don't grow under concrete, but they do, and they remember every name that walked over them. The man swallowed hard, eyes darting to the security camera in the corner. Walter noticed, smiled faintly, and stood. Don't worry, he said softly. I'm not done planting. He walked out before the man could respond, the sound of rain greeting him like an old ally. The air smelled of wet soil and iron, familiar, grounding. The plan was working. The recorder under the mayor's desk had already captured Harold Dunn's call from last night. The old man's voice had cracked in panic as he barked at his son to clean up that gardener mess before it spreads. Walter had listened to it in the shed at dawn, sitting in the dark with the watch ticking beside the speaker. Every word had fed the fire inside him. Now that fire had roots. He was no longer chasing truth. He was growing it slowly beneath their feet. As he crossed the park, the statues loomed like silent witnesses. The flowers he had planted glistened in the drizzle, bright red against gray stone. Each held a secret. Tiny waterproof capsules buried beneath the roots, each containing photos, dates, names, and recordings. When the next rainstorm hit, the water system would carry those capsules through the drains, down to the riverbank, where a journalist friend he hadn't spoken to in years would be waiting. She was the only person who had ever believed him back then. He could still hear her voice on the phone 2 nights ago. Walter, if you're right about this, it's going to blow the city open. He had smiled quietly. Good. Let's see if the ground still knows how to scream. That afternoon, Marcus Dunn arrived at the park with 2 workers. They were laughing at something as they inspected the fountain's wiring. Walter watched from a distance, broom in hand, pretending to sweep. Marcus wore a sharp gray suit, polished shoes that didn't belong anywhere near mud. He bent down, checked one of the flower beds Walter had replanted yesterday, and frowned. These weren't here before, he muttered. One of the workers shrugged. Old man must have added them. He's been busy lately. Marcus straightened, eyes scanning the park until they landed on Walter. Their gazes met for a long, tense second. Walter smiled politely, raising a hand in greeting. Marcus didn't wave back. He turned to his men and ordered, "Rip those out." Walter watched as they yanked the roses up by the roots, tossing them into a pile of wet dirt. The sight hurt more than he expected, but he didn't move. He just noted where they stopped digging. Their shovels hit something solid about 6 inches down. Marcus crouched, brushing the mud away, revealing one of the waterproof capsules. His face paled. What the hell is this? Walter turned away, walking toward the shed as if he hadn't seen a thing. Behind him, he could hear Marcus shouting orders, the men fumbling, the capsule cracking open under pressure. The faint sound of static in a voice, Marcus's own voice in the recorder, echoed in the distance. He won't find anything. Old man's too far gone. The silence that followed was colder than the rain. Inside the shed, Walter locked the door, exhaled slowly, and pressed play on the radio transmitter he'd hidden behind the tool rack. The same recording that had just been unearthed outside played live on the city's public broadcast frequency. Within minutes, half the town would hear Marcus Dunn's voice admitting to tampering with evidence. The message repeated, looping twice before Walter turned it off. He sat down, wiping his hands, the faint tremor returning for the first time in days. His plan had roots now, spreading where no one could see, feeding off their arrogance. He looked down at his palms, the dirt still fresh under his nails, and whispered, "Daniel, it's starting." The knock came sooner than he expected. 3 sharp raps on the shed door. "Walter," Marcus's voice called, low and strained. "Open up. We need to talk." Walter stood, wiped his hands on a rag, and opened the door halfway. Marcus was drenched, his polished image crumbling in the rain. "What did you do?" he demanded. "You're finished. You hear me? My father—" Walter cut him off. "Your father's the reason my son's bones are under this park. You think I care about being finished?" Marcus stepped forward, eyes wild. "You don't know what you're dealing with." Walter's gaze was steady. "You're right. I'm dealing with weeds." He shoved the door shut before Marcus could reply. The sound of the lock clicking echoed, like a gunshot. He walked back to the table, grabbed the last remaining recorder, and slipped it into his coat pocket. It contained Harold Dunn's voice this time, the mayor's call to his son, the final piece. He'd meant to deliver it quietly, but Marcus's panic had accelerated the clock. Walter took the watch from his pocket, wound it once, and listened to the soft tick. "You always said patience is a gardener's best tool," he murmured. "But sometimes patience turns into poison." He placed the watch back against his heart and stepped out into the storm again. By nightfall, the park was crawling with movement. Police lights flashed at the gate, officers speaking into radios as reporters gathered, drawn by the leaked recording. Walter stood at a distance, partly hidden beneath the statue's shadow. He watched Marcus argue with the officers, gesturing wildly, his voice drowned by thunder. Harold Dunn arrived moments later, face tight, eyes darting as cameras turned toward him. Walter saw them together, the father and son, framed under the same monument that had been built on Daniel's grave. The rain drenched them both as Harold tried to steady his son, whispering something furious. Marcus shook his head, shouting back. Walter could almost hear the cracks forming between them, the roots tearing through their foundation. He felt no joy, no triumph, just quiet inevitability. The truth had begun its work, slow and merciless. As the mayor turned toward the crowd, a reporter shouted the question that would start the unraveling. "Mayor Dunn, is it true your family had evidence in the park's construction?" The microphone surged forward. Harold froze, his lips parting, searching for words. Walter watched the man struggle to speak, and in that moment, everything went still. The noise, the rain, the world. Only the ticking remained. Walter stepped back into the shadows, his face unreadable, his eyes reflecting the flashing blue lights. "The roots remember," he whispered, almost to himself. And as lightning struck behind the statue, the air filled with the sound of 100 clocks ticking in unison, marking the moment the earth itself began to tell the truth. Make sure to like this channel, subscribe, and enjoy the videos.